to you. Today is Wednesday, 1st of April 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. And yesterday, I talked about predictability, revenue, assets, and whether the board, executive teams, or founders can trust the forecast. But here is the trap, if you may. Even a business with a cleaner forecast can still be fragile. For example, a cyber hit, a supplier outage, now very interesting situation that we live in the Middle East, a poor control environment, a weak reporting chain, a key system no one has stress tested, and suddenly the issue is not growth anymore. The issue is whether the firm can still function. So that is why today is about systems, controls, and resilience. This is where the board, executive teams, and founders stop talking in broad comfort words and start getting very precise. That are or what are the important services that we have to look into? What are the material controls that we have to put in place? What is the impact tolerance, right? Who owns this remediation, right? Who is responsible for these things? If those answers are vague, so this is not really resilience. It's probably a very interesting conversation, but not something that actually can be addressed if the situation happens. Now, let's pull the model again. You have it on the screen. This is a whole ecosystem, and today we are going to address the bottom section, this section number 3, which is about performances, governance, risk, compliance, and assets as a systems, right? Not as a software systems, as a system, as how they are the workflows, who is responsible for what is the evidence, who is the triage. So triage means who is the person that have to be called when and why, in which order, if something happens. And all these give you all the controls and resilience processes and systems that you're looking for to have in a company. Now, this is where I come into as a board advisor. So I build a rotating international advisory board around the milestones in front of the company. So you get the specialist capabilities you need in a fraction of the time it takes to hire one executive. That they are very good, very specific, very capable, very experienced. But 6 months later, what happened when you hire somebody to actually address the issue, solve it, and what you do with that talent sitting there because their expertise, capabilities, etc., are not for the next stage of the organization. They contribute, yes, but as you say, probably they are at 60%, 70% of what they were last 6 months. So this is without the consulting overhead, without the talent locked in, and with the members swapped every 6 months, as I mentioned, so the project can evolve. That's where I put these boards, international advisory boards together, so you don't have to depend on one person. You have a pool of talents that are coming as you need them. So let's go straight to the real issue. Resilience fails long before the crisis if the board, the executive teams, and the founders has already accepted a fuzzy ownership, right? So weak evidence and polite reporting. Now, let's look at some numbers to understand the impact of this. The first issue is frequency. So the cybersecurity breaches survey in 2025 found that 43% of UK businesses experienced a cyber breach or attack in the last 12 months. And among those, the 52% said it happened at least once a month, and 29% said last at least once a week. This is not a rare event territory. This is operating condition territory. So if the board and executive teams or founders still treat disruptions as an exception, it is reading the wrong word. And you will say, well, hold on a second. My organization is not that big to have cyber attacks at the frequency and amount that the survey is saying. Right. Remember one thing. This, by the way, this is an example. It doesn't mean that actually something, but actually is to show you how things are happening in the world in terms of actually unknown things that are happening, or you can take lessons from them to strengthen your capacities and your security. in Spain, Q1 this year, literally 2 months ago, what happened is that a major national energy distribution network like electricity has been hacked, right? It was a big scandal because actually they were claiming, and we mentioned this before, that they had the biggest and the strongest security systems in the country, right? Apparently that was a challenge for a hacker that thought that was very funny to hack them. But what happened is actually the depth of the hack was so deep that they took email addresses, account passwords, IBANs. IBAN is a code of your bank to do lodgements or pay bills, etc., or to your bank account, pretty much sort code and number, all in one number, right? So the PR to try to countermeasure that cyber attack was very strong, and they provided a plethora of guarantees, etc., that nothing will happen. To be seen, we don't know yet what happened really and the depth of, but actually the reports were saying that actually the attack was very deep. Now, you will say, well, I don't need cybersecurity. Why I need to do things actually the big corporation is responsible? Because your data is there. As a consumer, as a company, as a provider, as a supplier, you see your data is still there. So those cyber attacks, this information is useful to you because they say, oh, hold on a second. So it might be a good idea then to have a two-factor authentication on my accesses to accounts. So then if somebody steals my password, they still need to do an authentication, second authentication by email, by app, or whatever is the case, just to make sure that actually they don't access my information as easy as if just a simple password. Can I change my password in 90 days or every half a year? Yes, you can. So there are things that you say, oh, this is happening to somebody else. It's also affecting you and your organization and your people and your teams. So be careful when I mention these stats, because it's not the far distant issues of somebody else. Those far distance issues of somebody else also is affecting you in a way or how, if that happened to them, right? So be careful. The second issue that I want to mention today is ownership. The same survey found that only 27% of businesses had a board or executive team or founder member with explicit responsibilities for cybersecurity in 2025. That was down from 38% in 2021. So it seems that the things are moving backwards. And I say, well, we don't specialize in IT. We don't have this capability because you don't have the structure to have somebody that should have this in your board executive teams or founders, or you as a founder, somebody in your team that actually can do that. And the National Cybersecurity Center reported that around 204 nationally significant cyber attacks against the UK in the last 12 months are 89% higher than before. So that means that the biggest companies need a cyber resilience. The board level responsibility is there. So the threat is rising while the board ownership is sleeping, right? Because 38% is down compared to 2021. That is a bad combination. So you have less people that understand. And I'm not saying that they can fix it. I say that understand what are the implications in your executive teams and board levels. And or you as a founder say, what is the impact of my customer, my supply chain, my own organization, right? Now, there's a third issue here I want to mention in terms of this resilience and systems in your organization. And I'm using cyber attacks, but actually can be anything else. Just an example, because the statistics are quite staggering here. And we are living in a technological world, so it's affecting anyone, anywhere. It doesn't really matter. So, but I want to mention a third issue, which is a false comfort from the paperwork. And this is coming from the Financial Authority that says that firms were required by March last year, 2025, to complete a mapping and testing so they could remain within impact tolerances, right, for important business services. So this is just not about cyber attacks, it's important business services. So you have a plethora of services around your business or providing to other businesses. So it says that boards Executive teams and founders must review and approve the self-assessment documentation, and it still found areas for improvement, such as unclear board engagement, unclear responsibilities for remediation, and weak evidence trails. So, and this is on top of the provision 29 that happened now with the financial reporting code that asks boards to declare on the effectiveness of material internal controls from reporting, and this is happening since January this year, 2026. This includes non-financial controls too. So a theme update and a red, amber, green chart are no longer enough. It's calling about efficiencies. It's calling about material controls. It's calling about responsibility and remediation, right? So you say, again, we are not that big to have all these controls. That's correct. You don't need them documented in the Exos station that other companies are required. But guess what happened? It's the same as other things. It's cascaded down to the rest of the supply chain, right? So even if you don't have the voluntary requirement or ask or the legal requirement to do it, in a way or how the tenders are reflecting these, the contracts are reflecting these, the know your customer are reflecting these, you are pulled into this kind of requirements even if you are not prepared for it. And this is when sometimes you say, why did we lost this tender? It doesn't make any sense, because many of these questions are very specific and not related to your organization itself, but actually are related to their organization, and they need to make sure that actually their supply chain also satisfies these requirements. So that's what I mentioned in that. Be careful what you're having around your environment, because all this is affecting you, you like it or not, in a way or how. Now, in other words, imagine this in your organization. A weak control environment is like a wiring behind the wall, right? So you don't notice if while the lights are on, but you start to notice when the heat goes up, when you start to see something funny smells or smokes going around the rooms. And this is when your organizations start to lose contracts. Their contracts are not renewed. When your suppliers are saying, probably we have to go and search the market for other alternatives. Don't worry, we need this for compliance requirements. We need 3 alternatives. And you say, why this is happening? It didn't happen before. Well, here's part of the things why it's happening. Organizations need to comply with all these things to make their own organization resilient and to thrive through all these challenges in this world. And you are part of that process. So you have to be compliant with that too. So here's the harder question, if you may. If resilience is now a board or executive team or you as a founder level test of evidence and ownership, what should you be doing differently every month, but not once a year, right? As a board advisor, what I would propose is to consider the following. Number one, identify important business services, not just important departments. Customers do not care which teams owns the problem. They care whether the service still works, and you should ask which services will cause real harm if they were to stop, right? So how long the business could tolerate disruption and what dependencies underpin them. So remember, the customer doesn't care what are the problems. It's your responsibility to solve those problems. And you say, well, it's not fair. That's why we're in business. We are solving problems. The second thing is make controls visible, no theoretical. So visibility means which controls are material, which are tested, where are the known weaknesses, who owns the remediation. Remember what I mentioned, remediation, who is responsible for what, when, in which order, why, etc., etc. Where are the known weaknesses? I mentioned this. What is remediation? When is the next decision point, right? Which in the scale of issues, who is the next decision point? So the teams cannot see the control picture if you cannot see the control pictures in plain English, then the challenge is weak even before the disruption even begins. It's like a wire in the wall that I mentioned, right? So when you start to smell things and see fires and alarm bells going everywhere, fire alarms, something already happened there. But if you have that controlled, it's a different story. And the third thing I would suggest is treat resilience as a life management system, something that you manage, right? And use dashboards, track incidents, track lessons learned, near miss lessons, track supplier dependencies. I mentioned this already. Track whether scenario tests change and which based on which decisions. And this is the Financial Council Authority also is clear that resilience should move beyond compliance and become part of the strategic planning and the firm's business conduct. That is the right standard. It's the business conduct, it's your behavior, behave, how you do things in the way that you do them. Now, let me put pressure where it belongs. It's not on you, it's about if the board, executive teams, or you as a founder can see the gaps in systems, controls, and governance, who is helping close those at speed with enough credibility to challenge the management, to do these changes, and enough practical depth to fix those weak points. And that's what you gain working with me. You have three very things that actually are very clear, which are the business outcomes, which are the differentiators, and which are the risk reductions. In terms of outcomes, in this point number 3 that you have in front of you, the advisory board operating system, their controls and resilience through systems. So it's about the workflows, who is responsible for what, when, and why, etc., etc. So the outcome is a business that knows what matters most, what it can tolerate, and what needs fixing first. So you get stronger reporting, clear ownership, and a board that is no longer surprised by issues that had been sitting quietly in the operating model for months or perhaps years. And then you start to uncover these problems. And I mentioned yesterday a company that we started to talk to, and they have 1.2 million on pending invoices for contracts and tenders that they delivered. So why this has not been collected since H1 last year? So since June last year, 9 months later, it still look good in paper, but it's not materialized in the bank accounts. So what is happened there, right? So all these things we start to uncover and say, okay, let's go back and understand so we don't have this issue coming forward. In terms of differentiator, my model lets you bring in the right mix of operational risk, cybersecurity, governance, regulator experts, and performance expertise to address the company's next milestone. What is next in the company to both go stronger, more solid, more resilient? That matters because resilience is never just one discipline. It sits across systems, it sits across people, processes, suppliers, board judgment, executive team judgment, you as a founder judgment. So a rotating international advisory board gives you the mix without waiting months for one permanent hire to land in your company. And how I help you reduce risk? Because you are not betting the company on one single static board or a single expensive consulting work stream. You get direct board challenges, practical implementation insights, and the option to change capabilities as a project evolves. So that is how you tighten controls without locking yourself into a yesterday structure. Now, one action you can take home today, and is doable in 30 minutes or less: ask your management team for one-page resilient map before the next meeting and put only 5 headings on it. Yes, important services, impact tolerances, material controls, current weaknesses, and named owners. And just start to fill the blanks, and you will be very surprised if you have a very strong or weak or so processes there. Now, if you are a board member, a chair, non-executive, a founder, an executive team, and you want an international advisory board built around the milestones in front of your company for the next quarter, next year, you're raising capital. So you talk to me, because you get specialists in resilience systems and governance capability faster than hiring one executive without consult, and we do it without the consulting overhead and without the talent locked in. So book 30-minute calls so I can understand where you're standing today, what you're aiming for, and how we can help you to build these systems and resilience that will work in your business. So let's pause here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I will move to edge or the transformation and reinvention, the innovation of your organization. Now, why we're doing this? Because once your boards, your executive teams, or you as a founder knows the business is stable with these capabilities that we mentioned today, and you can withstand shocks. The next job is deciding how to stay ahead of the curve instead of simply staying alive. Yeah, we want to make a growth, and for that we need to look into the future, which what makes your company relevant in the future. That's your innovation, your reinvention, your transformation. So